26-year-old Sarah Winters was just an instructor at a Nevada desert range. Special Forces operators ignored her until the moment she made an impossible 1,782-meter shot. One bullet ended 5 years of anonymity. No one knew she was Artemis, the legendary ghost of the Phantom Protocol. Now her mask has fallen, and her past won't let her go. Welcome to The Story Begins. Before we dive into this story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure these voices are heard. They arrived as Sarah was setting up the range. Black uniforms, specialized weapons, hushed conversations. They didn't even look at her. Female instructors were just decoration to men like these. That was fine with Sarah. Being invisible was her profession, once upon a time. The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on the private shooting range 30 miles outside of Las Vegas. Heat waves distorted the distant targets, creating a mirage effect that would challenge even experienced marksmen. Perfect conditions for separating the talented from the truly exceptional. Sarah Winters adjusted her baseball cap, tucking stray blonde hair beneath it as she methodically arranged target stands at varying distances, standard civilian targets at 25, 50, and 100 yards. Nothing special, nothing that would draw attention, just the way she liked it. The morning breeze carried the scent of sage and dust, familiar companions in her daily routine. Sarah paused to take a sip from her water bottle, savoring the momentary stillness. These early mornings alone at the range were her meditation, the repetitive tasks of preparation allowing her mind to find a quiet center that had once been essential to her survival. At 26, Sarah had mastered the art of being forgettable. Average height, athletic but not remarkably so, pretty in an approachable way that didn't linger in memory. Even her voice, pleasant but unremarkable, was cultivated to leave no impression. Her clothes were generic brands in neutral colors. Nothing about Sarah Winters was designed to be remembered, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The small scar along her left jawline, the only visible reminder of her previous life, was usually concealed with a touch of makeup, though she'd skipped that step today, not expecting company until the afternoon. She absently traced the thin line with her fingertip, memories threatening to surface before she deliberately pushed them back into the compartmentalized darkness where they belonged. 5 years at this civilian range, teaching weekend warriors and corporate team building groups the basics of marksmanship. 5 years of deliberately average life after 8 years of something else entirely. Something that required her to be exceptional in ways that still sometimes haunted her sleep. Ways that left her reaching for a weapon that was no longer beneath her pillow when nightmares jolted her awake. The early morning had been peaceful. Just Sarah, the targets, and the vast Nevada desert stretching toward distant mountains. She'd come to appreciate the emptiness, the silence. It allowed her to hear her own thoughts, something that had been dangerous in her previous life. In the silence, she could sometimes make peace with the decisions she'd made, the lives she'd altered with the squeeze of a trigger. The black SUVs arrived in a cloud of dust, 5 vehicles in perfect formation. Professional. Military, definitely, though they wore no insignia or identifiable uniforms. Just tactical black, sunglasses, and the unmistakable bearing of men who had seen combat. Sarah recognized the type immediately. Special operators, likely conducting off-site training or evaluation. Her range was remote enough to offer privacy for classified exercises. She straightened, unconsciously adjusting her posture to something more neutral, less revealing of the training ingrained in her muscles. It was an automatic response, the chameleon adapting to potential scrutiny. Her eyes, a pale green that could appear blue or gray depending on the light, scanned the vehicles with practiced nonchalance that belied their methodical assessment. "Booked the range for a specialized training," their leader announced, approaching the small office where Sarah stood. Tall, weathered face, the calm confidence of someone accustomed to command. His eyes, sharp, assessing, swept the range with a tactical evaluation that missed nothing. "Captain Miller, we called ahead." Something about him triggered a faint recognition in Sarah, not his face, but his bearing, his presence. The way operators who had seen certain parts of the world carried themselves. She'd encountered men like him before, though in circumstances neither of them would acknowledge. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied with the practiced politeness she used with all clients, her accent deliberately neutral, lacking any regional identifiers. "Range is prepared to standard configurations. Anything specific you need adjusted?" He barely glanced at her, eyes sweeping over her form with the cursory assessment men like him gave to civilian women, determining in an instant that she presented neither threat nor value. The dismissal was familiar, almost comforting. It meant her cover was working. "We'll handle it from here." The dismissal was clear. Just another pretty blonde range attendant, not worth a second thought. Sarah nodded, stepping back as the team unloaded their equipment. Specialized long-range rifles, ballistic calculators, advanced scopes with custom modifications. This wasn't typical civilian hardware. Even most military units didn't have access to some of the technology she glimpsed. One rifle in particular caught her attention. A Chetak intervention, the same model she'd used in Kabul 6 years ago. Her fingers twitched involuntarily, muscle memory responding to the sight of the weapon. She curled them into a fist, suppressing the reaction. As they set up, Sarah busied herself with paperwork at the small desk nearby, seemingly engrossed in mundane tasks. But old habits died hard. Without appearing to, she noted team compositions, equipment specifications, and operational protocols. 4 shooters, 2 spotters, 1 commander. The configuration of a specialized strike team. Their movements revealed their training, the way they maintained situational awareness even in this seemingly secure location, the hand signals they used to communicate, the way they positioned themselves with clear fields of fire. Government operators without question. But which branch? Not standard military. Perhaps CIA's Special Activities Division or one of the Joint Special Operations Command units. "Target placement at 1,500 meters, Miller instructed his men. "Crosswind variable. Let's see who can make the shot." Sarah's ears perked up slightly. 1,500 meters was beyond the effective range of most conventional marksmen. Even with the specialized equipment they'd brought, the shot would be challenging, fascinating. A small part of her, a part she'd tried to bury, awakened with interest. One by one, the team members took their positions, precise, methodical, professional. The first shooter missed by a significant margin. The second came closer, but still wide. Frustration began to build as the third and fourth shooters also failed to connect. "Wind's a bitch today," muttered one of the spotters, a stocky man with a Boston accent. "Shifting every 30 seconds. "Conditions are impossible today," one shooter complained, adjusting his scope settings. "Winds shifting unpredictably." Sarah suppressed a smile. The wind wasn't unpredictable, not to someone who knew how to read the terrain. The particular configuration of the surrounding hills created a vortex effect that changed the wind patterns in ways that standard training wouldn't account for. She'd spent months studying these patterns, learning the rhythms of this particular stretch of desert. Knowledge that had once been essential to her survival now served only to make her a better instructor for weekend enthusiasts. Captain Miller frowned, taking position himself. His form was excellent, better than his team's. The way he settled behind the rifle spoke of thousands of hours of practice. His shot was the closest yet, but still missed the target center by several inches. His expression remained impassive, but tension showed in the set of his shoulders. "Something funny, miss." Miller had caught Sarah watching, a slight smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "Winters," she supplied. "Sarah Winters." "And no, sir, just observing." "Well, perhaps you'd care to offer some insight, since you find our efforts so amusing," he said, irritation evident in his voice. His men paused, attention shifting to the exchange. Sarah hesitated. 5 years of careful anonymity, 5 years of being nobody special. Just Sarah, the range instructor who taught tourists how to shoot straight enough for a souvenir photo. Speaking up now would draw attention she'd worked hard to avoid. And yet, the wind at this location forms a pocket around the 800-meter mark, she said finally, voice neutral. It creates a counterintuitive drift pattern that most shooters wouldn't account for. Miller studied her with narrowed eyes. "That's a very specific observation for a range attendant." Sarah shrugged. "I've worked here a long time." One of the team members snorted. "So you're saying you could make the shot?" His tone made it clear what he thought of that possibility. Before Sarah could respond, Miller's expression shifted subtly. Something in her posture or tone must have triggered his instincts. The same instincts that had kept him alive through multiple combat deployments. He glanced at his rifle, then back at Sarah, reassessing her with new intensity. "Care to demonstrate?" he asked, extending the weapon toward her. The range went silent. His team exchanged glances ranging from amusement to disbelief. A female civilian showing up special forces operators? Absurd. Sarah felt time slow, a familiar sensation from her operational days. Decision points, moments where choices changed trajectories permanently. This was one. She could demur, maintain her cover, continue her quiet existence teaching businessmen how to look macho for their LinkedIn profiles. Or she could take the rifle. 5 years of careful anonymity. 5 years of being nobody. One moment of decision. Sarah accepted the rifle, checking it with practiced hands that moved with unconscious precision. The team's amusement turned to curiosity as she made minute adjustments to the scope that even their top marksmen hadn't considered. The weight of the weapon felt right in her hands, like greeting an old friend. She identified the make, model, and modifications in seconds, her mind automatically calculating the ballistic profile. The scope was top quality, but calibrated incorrectly for the current humidity and barometric pressure. She made adjustments without conscious thought, fingers moving with the certainty of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times. She took position, lying prone behind the rifle with textbook form that suddenly didn't look civilian at all. Her breathing changed, slowing to a controlled rhythm that every trained shooter recognized as advanced technique. 3 seconds of absolute stillness as she read the wind, felt the subtle changes in air pressure, calculated bullet drop and drift. Inhale, half exhale, Hold. The world narrowed to the scope, the target, and the invisible path that connected them. In this moment, Sarah Winters disappeared, and the person she had once been emerged from dormancy. The rifle cracked once, the sound echoing across the desert. In the distance, the target rang with a perfect center hit. Silence fell over the range. The team stood motionless, processing what they had just witnessed. Sarah handed the rifle back to Miller, her face carefully neutral despite the rush of adrenaline and memory the shot had triggered. The familiar sensation of post-shot clarity hummed through her system, a state of heightened awareness she had once lived in for days at a time. "Lucky shot," one team member muttered, but his tone lacked conviction. Miller was still studying her, something like recognition dawning in his eyes. "That wasn't luck," he said quietly. Then, louder, "Again." Sarah hesitated, then accepted the rifle once more. Her cover was already compromised, might as well confirm what Miller was beginning to suspect. The second shot hit within millimeters of the first, perfect grouping at 1,500 meters. Statistically impossible for a civilian shooter, for any shooter who hadn't received the specific training she had. "Who are you?" Miller asked, his voice now devoid of its earlier dismissiveness. "Just a range instructor," Sarah replied, but the words sounded hollow even to her. Miller shook his head slowly. "No range instructor shoots like that. That's—" He paused, recalibrating his assessment. "That's Phantom Protocol level marksmanship." At the mention of those two words, Sarah went completely still, her eyes locked on Miller's. The temperature around her seemed to drop 10 degrees despite the desert heat. The team behind him tensed, suddenly alert, hands drifting subtly closer to their sidearms. The atmosphere shifted from curiosity to something more dangerous, the wariness of predators recognizing a fellow apex hunter. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said carefully, each word measured. "I think you do." Miller's voice dropped. "November 2018, Caracas, an impossible shot at 1,700 meters through a hotel window despite hurricane conditions." He paused. "We were the cleanup team. We never knew who took the shot." Images flashed through Sarah's mind. The rain-lashed window of her hide position, 96 hours without sleep. The weight of knowing that if she missed, thousands would die. The perfect stillness she had found in the eye of the storm, both literal and figurative. The target appearing for less than 3 seconds. The window between heartbeats when she had released the round that changed history. "You're mistaken," she said, but the denial lacked conviction. Sarah's expression remained carefully blank, but her mind raced. 5 years of anonymity shattered in a moment of pride, of showing off. A rookie mistake she would never have made in her former life. Had she grown so soft in retirement? Or had some part of her wanted to be recognized, to be seen for what she truly was? Your stance, your breathing pattern, the micro adjustments you made to my scope," Miller continued. "Only someone trained in the Phantom Protocol would know those techniques." The other team members were now watching with intense focus, all traces of earlier dismissiveness gone. The atmosphere had shifted completely. Where before they had seen a civilian woman barely worth acknowledging, now they saw something else entirely, something dangerous. "Sir," one of them said quietly, "Phantom was decommissioned years ago. All operatives were reportedly neutralized." "Apparently not all," Miller replied, eyes still fixed on Sarah. Sarah calculated her options. The office behind her contained an emergency exit she had installed herself. Her vehicle keys were in her pocket. She could be moving in less than 2 seconds. But these men were professionals, and they had numbers on their side. And if Miller truly knew about Phantom, about Caracas, then running would only confirm what he already suspected. Denial was pointless now. These men knew too much, had seen too much. 5 years of careful obscurity gone in an instant. I was never here, she said finally, her voice taking on a different quality. Harder, more authoritative. The voice of a person accustomed to giving orders that determined whether people lived or died. You never saw me. Miller's expression shifted to something like respect. The woman who made the Caracas shot should not be teaching tourists how to pose with pistols, he said. Your skills are still needed. Not by me, Sarah replied. I left that life for a reason. The world has changed since you disappeared, Miller countered. New threats, unconventional enemies. We need people with your specific capabilities. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Sarah allowed herself to remember. The discipline, the purpose, the knowledge that her singular skill had prevented conflicts rather than escalated them. One shot, one life, thousands saved. That had been the protocol's mandate. Before things changed, before the final mission that had led to her death and subsequent disappearance. I'm retired, she said firmly, turning to walk away. Peterson sends his regards, Miller called after her. Sarah froze mid-step. The name hit her like a physical blow. Peterson, her former handler. The man who had recruited her from Olympic shooting trials at 19. The man who had molded her into Artemis, the protocol's most effective operative. The man who had promised her that her skills would save lives, not just take them. The man she had watched die in Beirut 7 years ago, or so she had believed. She turned slowly. Peterson is dead. Miller shook his head. That's what everyone was supposed to think, including you. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. If Peterson was alive. My office, 10 minutes, Sarah said tersely. As the team watched, she walked away, her posture now completely transformed. Gone was the friendly range instructor. In her place strode a woman with the deadly grace of a predator. Every movement economical, purposeful, alert. Her eyes scanned the horizon, the buildings, the vehicles, automatically identifying threats, escape routes, defensive positions. Old habits deeply ingrained. One of the team members let out a low whistle. Captain, who exactly is she? Miller watched her retreating figure with something like awe. Remember how intelligence refers to certain operatives as ghosts? He asked quietly. She's what ghosts have nightmares about. In her small office, Sarah closed the blinds and disabled the single surveillance camera, a precaution she had maintained even in retirement. The sparse room contained little personal information, another habit from her previous life. No photographs, no mementos. Nothing that could be used to trace her connections or history. She unlocked a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside lay a satellite phone she had never used, maintained with a battery she changed monthly out of habits she couldn't break. Old protocols, old instincts that had kept her alive. Next to it, a Glock 19 with 3 full magazines and a passport under a name even Miller wouldn't know. She dialed a number from memory, one she had been instructed to forget but had rehearsed silently every night before sleep, a ritual that connected her to a past she both fled from and missed with unexpected intensity. The line connected. No greeting, just silence. Verification code Sierra Echo November 971. Sarah said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. A pause. Then a familiar voice. Hello, Artemis. It's been a while. Peterson. Alive. The sound of his voice brought back a flood of memories, training sessions in remote locations, briefings before impossible missions, the quiet pride when she exceeded even his expectations. And their last conversation, before Beirut, before everything changed. You promised me I was out, Sarah said, emotion finally cracking through her professional veneer. Circumstances change, Peterson replied. The world needs you again. The world never stopped needing me, Sarah countered. I stopped needing the burden. A sigh from the other end. Captain Miller wasn't supposed to approach you directly. That was unplanned, but perhaps necessary. He recognized my technique. Few would have. He's one of the best. That's why his team was selected. Sarah closed her eyes, centering herself. The familiar cold focus began to return, a state of mind she had once lived in permanently. What's the mission? Not over the phone. Miller has a secure briefing package. Review it, then decide. And if I refuse... A pause. Then we respect your choice. But hear them out first. The situation, it's unprecedented. The line went dead. Sarah stood motionless for several minutes, processing. Peterson alive, the protocol still operational despite official reports of its termination. A mission significant enough to risk exposing her cover. She thought of her life these past 5 years, quiet, anonymous, safe. The nightmares had finally started to fade. She had begun to build connections, superficial ones, but still more than she'd allowed herself in her operational years. Her neighbor's dog recognized her footsteps. The barista at the local coffee shop knew her order. Small, ordinary comforts that had gradually made her feel human again. Was she willing to give that up, to step back into the shadows where Artemis lived? 10 minutes later, Sarah emerged from her office. The team was waiting, now regarding her with the cautious respect reserved for apex predators. Their postures had shifted subtly, more alert, more professional. They were no longer dealing with a civilian. Captain Miller, she addressed him formally, I believe you have something for me. He nodded, retrieving a sealed envelope from his tactical vest. Eyes only, he said, handing it to her. Sarah broke the seal, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. Her expression revealed nothing, but her posture tensed incrementally as she absorbed the information. The mission parameters were complex, the stakes higher than anything she had encountered, even in her active years with the protocol. If the intelligence was accurate, the window for intervention was measured in days, not weeks. When she looked up, the transformation was complete. Sarah Winters, friendly range instructor, had disappeared entirely. In her place stood Artemis, the legendary phantom that even elite operators spoke of in whispers. Wheels up in 40 minutes, she said, her voice carrying unquestionable authority despite her civilian clothes. I'll need a full kit and updated meteorological data for the target location. The team snapped to attention, professionalism overriding their lingering shock. Ma'am, Miller acknowledged, we're at your disposal. As they moved toward the vehicles with renewed purpose, one team member dared to ask, the shot in Caracas, was it really 1,700 meters in hurricane conditions? A ghost of a smile crossed Sarah's face. 1,782 meters, through 2 panes of ballistic glass, and it was a typhoon. The legend of the invisible marksman was about to write its next chapter, The cold focus that Sarah once possessed appeared in her eyes. The Artemis within her had awakened, 1,782 meters, through two panes of ballistic glass. And it was a typhoon, she said with a slight smile. The Special Forces team stood in amazement. A legend had come to life before them. The story of the invisible marksman was about to write its next chapter. If you enjoyed this type of story, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. In the next episode, we'll explore Sarah's preparations for her new mission and why Peterson faked her death. Until next time on The Story Begins.